Now, folks, we have got David Curtin, leader of the Heritage Party. Please send in your greetings for him and any questions or comments that you may have. Let me bring on David right now.
Hello.
Hello, David. It's wonderful to see you. Thank you very much for coming on to our show tonight as a guest. We've had several people ask and get David Curtin on, and I thought that this was a good week to bring you on because you've been very busy on social media as well. So just by way of introduction, for those folk who don't know, I just want to read the first paragraph from your Heritage Party website, which says, quote, "For far too long, the United Kingdom has been led down a path of managed decline by successive governments, and the current government is ruining our society, culture and economy. We are a great nation and we deserve better. We have a glorious history and a wonderful heritage which has been given to us by our forefathers, which we should enjoy and build upon to pass on to our children and grandchildren." Well, 3 cheers for that. And I don't think you'll see that paragraph on any other party political website, quite frankly. So please tell us what inspired you to set up the Heritage Party to promote that particular message.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. Well, thanks for having me on the show, first of all. But yeah, I wrote that about 3 years ago, actually, because I set the Heritage Party up in 2020. And at the time, there was nothing in the sort of space that I was in. So I was elected onto the London Assembly in 2016. So you and people watching might have seen me over many, many years questioning Sadiq Khan in London. There's a lot to question there because he does a lot of very dubious things. But, you know, I was in another political party before I set up the Heritage Party, but there was nothing really in the sort of Brexit space that at that time, you know, the Brexit Party had deactivated. There was nothing else going on. So I thought we need a socially conservative party in the UK, and there isn't one because the Conservatives have got the name, but they're fake. They're not real Conservatives. In fact, in many cases, in many ways, they're anti-conservative. They're not protecting and conserving our heritage and our nation and the fabric of society. They are running it down. For example, and one thing that I really it concerns me, and I've been campaigning against for a long time, is this relationships and sexuality education in whatever form it is going into schools across the nation. They actually implemented it in England, just like the SNP implemented it in Scotland and Labour implemented it in Wales. And so, you know, that's just one example of where the Conservatives are not conservative. And the whole of the political sphere, the Westminster parties are basically one uni party. They're just doing the same thing. They've coalesced, and there may be small differences between some of them, but they're all pushing the woke agenda, the climate agenda. They all supported lockdowns and all that kind of stuff. And we need something that is going to stand all against all of those things. And our strapline, our motto, if you like, is freedom, family, nation, which summarizes what we're for, in 3 words. So I set the Heritage Party up to be a socially conservative party with positive principles that we would stick to consistently, which I think the nation needs to get back to restore what we were and the wonderful heritage that has been left to us from our forefathers, but which has been systematically broken down over many decades.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that in 2020, and that was such a revolutionary year, revolutionary against Britain in many ways, because not only were we locked down, which went against our national tradition of freedom of movement, but those of us who spoke up against government policy often found ourselves silenced. And in fact, there was government and there still is government offices running to shut people down who don't go along with the trends. And there was also, of course, the whole, for want of a better expression, the BLM thing, which was literally anti-heritage, anti-British history, or
Yeah.
certainly misrepresenting British history, put it that way.
Mm.
So it was good to see you largely alone, really, in many ways, fighting back against that. You mentioned there that we have a Uni Party in charge. Have you ever figured out how that Uni Party has come about? Why should it have gone like that? That we've got two parties who are so similar.
I think they've all signed up to the various different agendas which are coming from globalist bodies which set themselves up above nation states. Obviously the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, and so on, and the Bank of International Settlements with what they want to do. So, the UN has got Agenda 2030 and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. That's pushing all of the climate alarmism, that they want to dismantle our energy infrastructure. So you see every single party is totally beholden to this climate emergency, as they call it. There is no climate emergency because carbon dioxide is not harmful, but they signed up to this. The sexuality education is part of that. The World Health Organization is pushing that as well, and they have a grid of outcomes and things that they want to teach children on, and it's absolutely disgusting. And that's why you see materials going into schools which teach children about self-pleasure, to put it in the mildest form possible, to 4 and 5 year olds, which is absolutely appalling. And then you've got, obviously, the World Economic Forum is pushing the "you will own nothing and be happy" agenda, and so essentially to take away private property, and also you're pushing everything that happened in the lockdown period and the COVID period with these experimental injections going on, which comes back to what you said at the beginning, is that 2020 was a terrible year, and all of the parties in Westminster, all of the MPs together voted for the Coronavirus Act. Not a single one voted against it, even though they said, some of them beat their breasts and said, oh, how terrible it was, but they voted for it anyway. And then there was the propaganda coming from the behavioral psychology units that would call people like me and you and anyone who stood against it as COVIDiots and granny killers and vaccine refuseniks, and all of these new words they made up to smear people, conspiracy theorists, and so on. And this is what I got called from almost everybody all over the place, because actually at the beginning in 2020, I think I was the only elected politician at all who opposed lockdowns and opposed the injections on the basis that there is no long-term safety data. With my scientific background, I can tell you, every single medicine and drug and pharmaceutical that comes onto the market needs to go through rigorous safety and efficacy testing for about 10 years before it gets anywhere near the market. But this was just dosed into people after 3 months. I mean, there's clearly, you just don't do that. But everybody did it anyway, and then tried to smear and discredit anyone who stuck to the normal procedure of needing long-term safety data.
Yes.
It was very obvious to me that they were all in it together, and they're all pushing things that are being done to harm people. And, it's absolutely appalling, and we need to speak up against it.
Yes. Do you see this agenda as being a deliberately, well, you sort of alluded to it there, as a deliberately harmful one, or do you see it as simply something that it's just a load of people who don't really know what they're doing and they're just mucking up and there might be some bad consequences but they don't really realize it? Or do you think, no, there's actually a militant evil
I think there's different levels. There's different levels of people. I do think it is a planned agenda. The people right at the top who are pushing it, they know what's going on. And the idea is, this is a plan that's been going on for a long time, and there are different aspects of it. I feel like I'm fighting 20 different battles at the same time, but it is ultimately to get rid of nation states, get rid of families, get rid of private property. Those are the three things which are in the Communist Manifesto from Karl Marx in 1848. So it's essentially the implementation of communism in sort of ideologically. But there's much more added to it now with the technology that we've got, and with the technocracy that will run a one world system, a government system with AI, added on top of what was there 150 years ago. So there are some people who actively want to do this. They want to cause chaos in order to impoverish people, destroy small businesses, destroy livelihoods, and take away people's property through financial crises. And then also the regulations which are coming in to do with climate and buildings having to adhere to new climate regulations and have a certain energy rating. And if your house or home doesn't adhere to those new regulations, then you won't be able to sell it or rent it and eventually live in it. So, that's just another aspect of the many different things coming against us. But sorry, within that, there's a whole class of useful idiots who think that it's a good thing, who actually genuinely believed that, because they were lied to and deceived, sadly, very easily, to think that everybody needed a COVID injection to protect them against COVID, which is nonsense. And that mass immigration is a good thing. And if you're against that, then you're racist. And then we also need to save the planet. So we need to stop using our cars, and all these different things. So there's a lot of people who are brainwashed so easily. And that is the disturbing thing, is that how can a nation which has such a great history have a whole, the majority of society is so easily going along with all the propaganda which is put into their heads. It's quite frightening. But then also people making money out of it too, which is a whole other thing.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Well, you ask how can people go along with it? I think we're entering a stage where people's brains have not yet caught up with the ability to handle the barrage of information that we're subjected to, because we're not really meant as human beings to be subjected to all of these images and all of these problems and all of these choices and all of these sorts of things. We're really just meant to take the day as it comes and very quietly just live in the woods and hunt rabbits and stuff like that. We're not meant to suddenly be worrying about what's happening in the other side of the world or having an opinion on it, or then trying to understand whether a vaccine is good or bad or for you. It's like too much information. Most people can't handle it. And so the natural default position for so many people, understandably, is just to say, well, that group look like they know what they're talking about, or I favour the way that guy looks over the way that other party politician looks like. So I'm just going to go with what they say. And that's just a natural kind of default. But that means that so many of us can get taken along with stuff. And we're seeing that all of these things, COVID and all of the wars that have happened and that are happening and so on, people forced to go along with things and make choices that very often they're just following somebody else's agenda, really. That's the bad thing. You mentioned, of course, you said that you had a background in chemistry. You used to be a chemistry teacher, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. For nearly 20 years, I was a chemistry teacher up to A-level and IB diploma level here and also abroad as well. So, I mean, that's been fantastic. But it does give me that.
You went to St. Andrews University.
Right, I did. Yeah. I loved it. I had a wonderful time at St. Andrews for 4 years, when I was young. I'd say, that was my university.
Why did you pick St. Andrews? Because most people, if I suppose you were living in England at the time, they just pick the nearest university to them.
It just looked amazing, and it looked so nice, and there's so much history, so much tradition. You don't really know everything about every university in the country. You just do your research, look at things. But it was very good, a university for science and everything. And I was delighted to be offered a place, being Scotland's oldest university and the the third oldest university in the country. I guess I was drawn to the place having a lot of history and a lot of heritage and being a beautiful, beautiful city.
Well, there you go. It would be that part of you that values the historical past. You saw St Andrews, as you just said there, as something with the heritage that'd be that perhaps that you were subconsciously drawn to. Paul sent a question in here. It says, David, can you shed any light on the shocking event of an elections hustings at which you were going to speak in Lewisham being shut down by extremists? What excuses did the police offer?
That was a long time ago. That was June 2018. So that was over 5 years ago now. I was going into a hustings. The Labour and the Tory candidate didn't turn up. There was another party there called For Britain, and the police made the excuse that they were far-right extremists and they were coming to disrupt the meeting. But they didn't even turn up at the meeting. But there was actually a huge crowd of stand up to racism people, which is an arm's length Labour Party organisation, and they were intimidating everybody going in. And I was shouted at and nearly spat on as I went in, but I mean, I'm a big guy, so I wasn't too intimidated by it. But a lot of other people in the audience, were. Obviously who's not as big as I am. So, and then after 20 minutes, the candidates gave the speeches and the police decided to close the meeting. I mean, never heard anything like that in my life. This was a hustings for an election, and there was a crowd of far left outside agitating, causing all kinds of problems, acting like they were going to have a riot and storm the meeting, and the police closed it down. And, I asked Sadiq Khan about it later on in the London Assembly, and he just read some statement out which was full of untruths about the event, basically. So, it was just complete rubbish that they said. They just made up an excuse and blamed, it was the far right, the far right were going to turn up, which is absolute nonsense.
They were going to turn up, but never turned up. But the ones that turned up and actually did turn up, they stopped it. It was like crazy.
Right.
Good. Well, do you have plans for next year's general election? Is the Heritage Party planning to stand in it?
I want to stand in as many places as we possibly can. So I'm taking on candidates. I'm interviewing candidates. We have in many places around the country. Obviously, there's new constituencies going to be in place for the next general election because they're changing the boundaries. But we will just work and we'll stand as many people as we can with whatever we can do. So we will just. I have a long-term vision, so there'll be the local elections this year, the coming up in May 2024, the general election. But we just need to we're here for the long term. So we will just do whatever we can.
Good. What I liked when I was reading through the Heritage Party website is that you seem to be working from fundamental principles on all of your matters. So that means that you don't get blown by the winds of outrageous fortune or whatever happens to be the thing of the day. And you made a tweet back on the 22nd of October. You said, quote, right-wing commentators have for years upheld the right to free speech for everyone, even if that speech is offensive to some. We should continue to uphold free speech for everyone, including both pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian rallies. And I thought, well, I'm glad to see that. I'm glad to see that somebody else thinks the same as I do, because I had been shocked by some right-wing, as you say, commentators who love to talk about freedom of speech and how it's so bad that they get cancelled. And then there's some pro-Palestinian demo, and they're the first people to jump up and say, this is outrageous, this shouldn't be happening, arrest these people, send them home.
Yeah.
What made you
No, absolutely. I'm exactly the same. I found that very disturbing that you had some people I know, in the right-wing commentariat space who have been free speech. Our free speech has been taken away. We need free speech. We stand up for this. And then this happens, and suddenly where's free speech? It's gone. You know, people should not be allowed to say this word or that word, or this march should be closed down. And I know within the march there were some individuals doing things which are very unsavory and perhaps going beyond, you know, the bounds of free speech and inciting violence. And that's absolutely right, that they should be arrested as individuals and charged as individuals. But, you know, to actually say this rally must not happen because we don't agree with it, once you go down that road, then the other side can say to us, well, you shouldn't be allowed to have your rally or do your things. And what was happened already in law is that the left have made it a criminal offense to pray and protest outside abortion centers, you know, and everyone, I think, on the right wing would agree that that is, you know, a blatant attack on free speech. It shouldn't have happened. Not even Germany has done that. They still allow that to happen. But when we need to uphold the principle, and we always say, even if it's offensive to some people, you should be able to say it, you know? I mean, you don't be abusive. You don't harass people, you don't incite violence or glorify terrorism, of course, but you should be allowed to express your opinion or support for something without being closed down. You know, I mean, so that's why I put that tweet out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make the good point there about praying as well, and how that's just going to be used against us. I saw some people saying, you know how you see these pictures of all these Muslims are always down on their knees praying, and some people don't like that, and I'd rather there wasn't a huge population of non-Christians, but you can't say that they can't pray. Obviously they can pray, you know, unless if you're gonna say no praying, then who's the first people who are going to get hit by that? Christians.
Exactly. I mean, I do think, you know, that where there was the mass prayer in Whitehall, I don't agree with that because they closed down the public highway, you know. So, I mean, that's another issue. But, you know, if they want to go and pray in the park, yeah, okay, they can go and pray in the park. You know, they're not hurting anybody. But, you know, the other issue and the other side of that is I don't agree with mass rapid immigration, which has happened over 30 or so years of Labour and Tory. So we've got the issue. That's another issue that needs to be dealt with. But, you know, if people are here, they should have the freedom to speak and to express themselves, provided that they're not, you know, doing anything which is breaking the law.
Yes, and we've always had those laws in the sense that you can't incite to a crime. That is, you can't incite to violence or incite to arson or incite to any other crime, because that is a crime in itself. You're encouraging people to commit a crime. But if you're just saying unsavory language that some people have a different opinion about, then that's a different matter entirely. But they came up with this clever concept of hate speech, which people like yourselves no doubt always campaigned against, because you could see how that could easily just be drawn into any...
defined? Yeah.
How's it defined? It's speech that I don't like is essentially what it comes down to. Yeah. I also want to raise the matter with you. I saw a really good video that you did, because you're basically doing almost like a video a day these days.
Right, I'm trying. Yeah,
really. That requires a lot of effort. But anyway, you did one the other day, and I would really encourage people to watch this, because it's very unusual. And you spoke about the concept of Judeo-Christian. And I know that the Heritage Party is an overtly Christian party. And you were pointing out that this phrase never existed really in any way prior to 1935. Right. And in fact, it is a misleading phrase because it gives the impression that these are two equivalent religions that are almost compatible with each other in a sense. Would you like to just explain? We'll put the link up in our threads for that video so other people can see it. But I found it very illuminating. What was the thinking behind you coming out with that?
I mean, this is a phrase which is almost ubiquitous at the moment, and people hear it and they don't even think about the phrase. It's like a propaganda phrase. It was actually promoted in the 1930s and 1940s to bring common cause between Jews and Christians, mostly in America, against National Socialism, against Hitler and everybody. And also it sort of caught on in Europe as well, and then it stayed with us. But it was never used at all before the 1930s. It was a couple of people randomly used the phrase, here and there, but not to mean, that Jews and Christians had some common culture, common history, common heritage. Because before then, the two religions were seen as completely distinct. Evolving after Jesus. Obviously, Christians accept that Jesus is the Messiah. He died and rose again. And then we have the New Testament. The Jews then didn't accept Jesus. They had the Babylonian Talmud was written in the 2nd to 4th century, which says horrible things about Jesus. And then later on, there's the Kabbalah was developed in the 13th century, actually in France. So it's a completely distinct religion with its own books. And yet, some Jews, obviously will respect the Old Testament as well. But some you have Talmudic Jews and Kabbalistic Jews as well, who put an emphasis on those other two books. And so this is really something I just wanted to bring into the conversation to highlight, because at the moment, with the situation going on in Israel, Palestine, everybody is being manipulated to support one side or the other. And I completely understand Jews supporting Israel. I completely understand Arabs supporting Palestine. But it's so strange when Anglo-Saxons and German people and Scandinavians and Slavic people have been programmed to have a visceral emotional support or reaction for one side or the other. It doesn't make any sense. But I think especially Christians, Protestant Christians in America particularly, but also in Europe and other places where Protestantism is strong, have been programmed with phrases like this concept of Judeo-Christian. We have a Judeo-Christian heritage and culture. Therefore, you must support Israel over Palestine. And that is this is not actually what should be the case. This is not how, this is not, has no historical foundation before the 1930s and 1940s. So I think this is just something I wanted to bring to people's attention so they could think about it.
Yes, I'm glad that you did, because I had been mystified by looking at Twitter and seeing Americans in particular who were almost psychopathically opposed to the Palestinians and were openly calling for basically genocide. And then you go on to this person's account and he calls himself a Christian.
Yeah. I'm
like, what? That makes no sense, because as you pointed out in that video, there's a lot of Christians in Gaza.
Right.
There's all the Arab Christians that we always forget about. And I think we forget about them because we're made to think that it's just like European Christians and Jews in the Middle East. And in that phrase, Judeo-Christianity, that's what it tends to make us think, without us realizing that there's all these Arab Christians as well who are all caught up in the conflict, and we're forgetting about them. Yeah, and they've got their opinions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's about 5 times as many Palestinian Christians as there are Israeli Christians, Messianic Jews. Yeah, there's about 30,000 Messianic Jews, as I understand, living in Israel, which is fantastic. But 150 to 200,000 Palestinian Christians, mostly in the West Bank, not that many in Gaza, but the number is going down. I think there's only 1,000 or so left. But the third oldest church in the world, St. Porphyrius Church, I think, is in Gaza and was recently bombed in a building belonging to the church was bombed recently by the Israeli Defense Force, and killing a lot of Christians who were, seeking shelter there. So, we need to realize that there's many Arab Christians who get completely cancelled, if you like. It's almost as though their existence is not mentioned, as though people don't want to even acknowledge that they exist. But, before 9/11 and the war on terror, there were tens of thousands millions of Arab Christians, particularly in Syria and Iraq, living very happily. Lebanon was once a majority Christian country. It's changed now because of massive immigration into Lebanon. But and also in Palestine, in Egypt, There's 20% of Egypt are Coptic Christians, so there's huge numbers. And my main concern for the Middle East is that, you know, as a Christian, obviously, is my Christian brethren will have the freedom to worship freely and to be able to share the gospel freely. You know, that's my main concern for the Middle East.
Fantastic. Well, do you know what? I'm so thankful that you are doing what you're doing, David, because you are, at the moment, you're fairly a lone voice in that effort, but a powerful one and a very sincere one. So thank you for everything that you do in that regard. And I do encourage people to check out heritageparty.org, and also David is on Twitter at twitter.com/David Curtin. And for people listening on our podcast, Curtin is Kurten. And you've also got, I think, is your personal website where you put up your videos, which is davidcurtin.net. And they're worth checking out. David, that's a half hour, went very, very quickly.
Oh, yes.
Thank you so much. Would love to have you back on again sometime. No doubt there'll be plenty more to speak about. All I can say at the moment is thanks again, and Godspeed. God bless you and your fantastic work that you do.
Thank you.